The US Air Force just announced that an F-22 Raptor recently scored the longest known hit on an airborne target in history using an AIM-120 AMRAAM, or Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile. But just how far out that target was remains a bit of a mystery. Now, this record-breaking shot took place near Eglin Air Force Base in Florida last fall, but wasn't disclosed to the public until this week. And this new record, whatever it is, supersedes the previously disclosed longest ever AMRAAM shot scored by an F-15C Eagle in 2021 against a BQM-167 subscale target drone. And while the range of that hit has also not been disclosed, it was scored using an AIM-120D, which was among the latest iterations of AMRAAM fielded at the time and is believed to have a maximum range of just around 100 miles, or a bit over 160 kilometers. This new hit, scored by an F-22 Raptor off the coast of Florida, saw the use of an even newer AIM-120 F3R, with that F3R short for Form, Fit, and Function Refresh. And it would seem the F3R may just have the longest legs of them all. So let's dive into this story and see why it's no surprise that the Raptor has stolen the Eagle's AMRAAM record. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. The Supermarine Spitfire is one of my all-time favorite aircraft, not just because of its engineering, but because of the insane bravery of the pilots who flew it. During the Battle of Britain, pilots got as little as just 9 hours of formal flight training before being sent up into combat to defend the nation against wave after wave of German fighters and bombers. These pilots often flew multiple sorties per day, and they were outnumbered and outgunned in literally all of them. But somehow, they still managed to defend Britain's skies. And not all of these incredible aviators were Brits themselves, like Australian ace Patterson Clarence Hughes, who scored 17 air-to-air victories before being shot down over the UK in Spitfire number X4009. But why am I telling you this? Well, because now's your chance to own a piece of aviation history with Wreckwatch's X4009 series of timepieces. You see, an Australian nonprofit called the Hunter Fighter Collection is actively restoring the recovered wreckage of that aircraft, and that means replacing some of the original damaged aluminum. So, Wreckwatch has partnered with them to reforge that original Spitfire aluminum into the 6 o'clock subdial for every watch in their X4009 line, meaning every watch includes real original aluminum from that aircraft. And because a portion of every watch sold goes straight back to the Hunter Fighter Collection to restore this aircraft, that means buying one doesn't just get you a piece of its incredible history, it means you are very literally helping to keep that history alive. Now, each X4009 timepiece is certified Swiss-made and crafted with uncompromising attention to detail. Beyond incorporating that original Spitfire material, the design also pays tribute to World War II pilot watches with things like a ribbon spar crown guard inspired by aircraft construction and an X4009 Spitfire silhouette engraved on the rotor. Now, Wreckwatches is currently offering a 15% discount when you pre-order your X4009 timepiece for the next production batch. But if you use my promo code SAND, S-A-N-D, you'll get another 10% off. And combined, that's almost $600 off the price of this watch. And I want to be clear, I'm not feigning excitement for the ad read. I already have the Habu timepiece from Wreckwatches, and it's made me fall in love with wearing watches again. So go to wreckwatches.com or just follow that link in the description below to buy your X4009 Spitfire timepiece before they run out. While the US Air Force is actively testing Lockheed's new extremely long-range AIM-260, and the US Navy is now touting its incredible AIM-174B, that doesn't mean Raytheon's going to let its long-serving AMRAAM languish in retirement. Instead, they're working tirelessly to make this medium-range air-to-air missile a long-range powerhouse. And the new F-3R AMRAAM is unlikely to be the last new development that we hear about from this program. But as it stands, Raytheon claims the F-3R is already allowing pilots, quote, the ability to take shots that are further than they ever imagined before. And because the improvements are largely software-based, there's no real change in how the weapon is employed by its pilot, meaning there's no additional training required to leverage the longer ranges available in new AMRAAMs that are already rolling out of the production line. And I mean that because they literally are already rolling out of those production lines, with Raytheon saying that the missiles being built today are already equipped with that F-3R refresh. Now, the previous AMRAAM record, set by an F-15C in 2021, was described at the time as the longest known air-to-air missile shot to date, and was said to be a demonstration of the Air Force's long-range kill chain capabilities, which suggests, at least, that the F-15C likely engaged that target drone without an effective target track from its own onboard AN/APG-63V active electronically scanned array radar. Instead, the missile probably received target data relayed to it by a nearby Airborne Warning and Control System aircraft, or AWACS. And that capability is an increasingly vital element of America's long-range air-to-air combat concept of operations, with new missiles like the aforementioned AIM-174, which is really just an air-launched variant of the broadly capable SM-6 interceptor, potentially able to hit targets more than 300 miles away. Now, at those ranges, the launching fighter, which in the case of the AIM-174 would be a Navy FA-18 Super Hornet, can't even see the missile's intended target on radar, but can instead rely on the much more powerful arrays found aboard the Navy's warships and airborne warning and control aircraft for good target tracks. And when it comes to flying into contested airspace, forward advancing stealth F-35Cs can relay target data back to Super Hornets, taking up the rear to engage those fighters on the F-35's behalf, effectively expanding the arsenal available to stealth fighters for the air-to-air fight. And while it is possible that the F-22 that broke the Eagles record may have benefited from this same sort of kill chain, it is also worth noting that the Raptor's incredibly advanced AN/APG-77V1 array is arguably the most capable air-to-air focused radar on the planet, potentially even outperforming the F-35's more modern AN/APG-81, at least against airborne targets. And that's not the only thing that makes the Raptor uniquely suited for beyond visual range engagements using weapons like the AMRAAM. Among the upgrades found in the F-3R are improved flight profiles meant to take advantage of the high altitudes and high speeds in which these weapons can be launched from aircraft like the Raptor, which can cruise at higher speeds and fly at higher altitudes than most in-service jets. The F-22 service ceiling has not been publicly disclosed, and on the official Air Force fact sheet, it's listed just as above 50,000 feet. But we know that the Raptor that shot down that Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina back in 2023 was flying at well above 60,000 feet at the time. And when I directly asked a seasoned Raptor pilot just how high the F-22 can fly not too long ago, he told me that he couldn't say, but that it was higher than any other fighter in service today, which suggests a service ceiling that very likely exceeds 65,000 feet. Now, for context, 62,000 feet is generally considered to be the Armstrong limit, or the altitude where air pressure gets so thin that water will literally boil at human body temperature, meaning exposure to the air at that height would see the water literally boil out of your eyes and mouth. And just as importantly, the F-22's aerodynamic design, combined with its immensely powerful Pratt & Whitney F-119 turbofan engines, gives this fighter the ability to supercruise, or to fly at supersonic speeds without using its fuel-hungry afterburners. In fact, the F-22 pumps out more thrust without its afterburners than the F-15C can with its afterburners at full tilt. And as a result, the Raptor can supercruise at an absolutely astonishing Mach 1.76, flying at that speed while still conserving fuel for the fight. And just for good measure, if a Raptor pilot does lean into the afterburners, well, then the jet can produce more thrust than even the mighty SR-71 Blackbird when it needs to. And this combination of extreme altitude and launch speeds, combined with software changes to the AMRAAM's flight profiles meant to leverage that added energy, makes for a very long-range combination. And to really understand why, it's important to understand how the maximum ranges of these weapons are determined, and why, depending on context, they can be a bit misleading. The under-discussed reality of maximum missile ranges is that these figures don't just include how far the weapon can travel under power, but rather also how far it can coast after depleting all of its fuel and still feasibly hit a sluggish but airborne target. In fact, long-range air-to-air missiles don't just travel straight toward their targets as you might think, but instead they usually climb to much higher altitudes while flying under power. And this allows the missile to use the combination of potential energy, or altitude, and kinetic energy, or airspeed, to continue closing with a target well after all of its fuel's been expended. The legendary AIM-54 Phoenix missile, once carried by F-14 Tomcats, for instance, would famously climb to more than 100,000 feet in altitude after launch in order to engage incoming bombers at 100 miles or more. In fact, according to reporting out of the war zone, the Phoenix may have even hit targets as far out as a reported 126 or maybe even 132 miles in its prime. Now, as the missile coasts, air flowing over its tail fins still allows the missile to adjust course as it closes with such a target, but every change in direction comes at the expense of kinetic and potential energy, reducing the overall range that the missile can travel. As a result, a maximum range shot can be very effective when shooting at big sluggish platforms like a bomber or a refueling tanker or an AWACS, but it isn't very effective against maneuverable targets like fighters. The missile just doesn't have enough energy left in the form of fuel, speed, or altitude to perform the dramatic aerobatics necessary to close with a nimble jet that's trying to shake it at max range. As a result, most air-to-air missiles are only really useful against other fighters at maybe 70% or so of their reported maximum ranges, with the exception of some weapons like the MBDA Meteor, which uses a solid fuel ducted ramjet to control its fuel burn and allow it to fly under power out to further distances. But that's not the only way you can improve your chances at scoring a hit at long range. As Raytheon is proving with the AMRAAM, improved software and flight control computers can allow the missile to calculate a more efficient flight path to its target, making it possible to conserve as much potential and kinetic energy as it can for as long as it can, for increased range and improved kinematics at the point of contact. And extending these ranges is, at this point, paramount, as both Chinese and Russian weapons developers have been fielding increasingly long-ranged air-to-air missiles of their own, with China's own PL-15 actually cited by the Air Force as part of the impetus behind funding the new AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile. You see, the PL-15 is said to be a 200-kilometer class, or a roughly 125-mile class weapon, meaning it outranges the AIM-120D and could potentially give Chinese fighters an advantage in the fight. China's still in testing but much larger PL-17, also known within China as the PLX, is too large to fit inside the weapons bay of a stealth fighter, but is said to offer up to 400 kilometers in range. That is pretty close to 250 miles. However, it is worth noting that most Chinese fighters also still carry PL-12s, the precursor to the PL-15 that's more akin to earlier AMRAAM iterations like the AIM-120B or C. And to be clear, the latest iteration AMRAAM F-3R may not be the longest-ranged air-to-air missile in American service, let alone in the world, but it is among the furthest-reaching and most reliable airborne weapon systems in the world. To date, AIM-120s have downed at least 16 aircraft in combat, including the most recent American air-to-air victory from 2017, when a U.S. Navy F-18 Super Hornet took down a Syrian Su-22 with one. Today, at least 43 countries have operated some variant of the AMRAAM, accounting for more than a combined 6,000 successful live-fire launches from at least 14 different types of aircraft. Now, the maximum range of the new AMRAAM F-3R is, of course, classified, but its manufacturer, Raytheon, recently claimed that its reach is now approaching the lower end of the threshold sought by the new AIM-260 missile program, which again is aiming to field a new long-range air-to-air missile to serve as a higher-end option for beyond visual range engagements, while still maintaining the same basic shape and form factor to be stowed inside the internal weapons bays of stealth fighters. Now, while not disclosed, the bottom edge of the range requirements for the AIM-260 is generally believed to be around 125 miles, again, due to the PL-15. And while this long shot wasn't disclosed to the public until this week, the Pentagon was obviously well aware of how the AMRAAM performed in this test by August of this year, when it awarded Raytheon a record-breaking $3.5 billion contract for AMRAAM production and sustainment, which also includes producing missiles for foreign military sales to 19 partner nations that are still operating this weapon. Now, the AMRAAM's been in service in one form or another since 1991, but it's seen extensive updating since the original AIM-120A, which offered a reported range of only around 46 miles, or about 75 kilometers. By the time we got to the AIM-120C7 in the early 2000s, the weapon was given a new rocket motor and increased fuel storage, made possible in part by further miniaturizing the flight control system and freeing up about 15 centimeters worth of interior space. Now, that stretched the AMRAAM's legs out to better than 56 miles, or around 90 kilometers, but to some extent, the AMRAAM was still a brute force missile at the time, and it wasn't until the next upgrade, known as the AIM-120D, that this missile gained some serious technological finesse. Now, the AIM-120D not only added a two-way data link for mid-course target updates, an enhanced navigation suite, and improved high off-bore sight targeting capabilities, but maybe most notably, it also added a larger motor that increased the AMRAAM's top speed to above Mach 4, while providing a 50% increase in range, pushing the weapon's reach out to right about 100 miles, or about 160 kilometers. And more software improvements, along with a more efficient battery, stretch that out even further in the AIM-120D3, which is believed to reach out to around 111 miles. Now it would seem that the new F-3R can reach even further than that. And I'll quote Raytheon here. "We were able to fly it much longer. The propulsion and aerodynamic properties of the missile in that F-3R variant always had the capability to go further. We just had not been able to take advantage of it. So at this point, it's the way we're flying it. It's flying higher and longer. We can fly at much faster speed at release, which just improves the performance of the missile." And incredibly, Raytheon says they believe they can still pull more range out of the AMRAAM as they continue to refine its flight control software. And of course, it is worth remembering that DARPA's Longshot program, which is fielding what effectively amounts to air-launched drones that carry their own pair of AIM-120 AMRAAMs, could make the extended ranges of these weapons that much more dangerous, not only significantly increasing the reach of these missiles, but also allowing a single fighter to engage a target from multiple vectors at once, creating a significant air combat advantage. And while the AIM-260 is meant to offer superior range and performance in a weapon that's roughly the same size and shape, that does not mean these new and improved AMRAAMs are going away anytime soon. Instead, the Air Force envisions the AIM-120 continuing to serve as the lower end of a 21st century high-low mix of BVR missiles, using the lower-cost AMRAAM for targets at the cusp of beyond visual range and likely all the way out to past 100 miles, and the pricier AIM-260 for targets even further out. Now, obviously, this is a new development, so we'll be staying on top of it. And with that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and now merch from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and please click subscribe down below. I'm trying to hit 500,000 subscribers by the end of the month, and we are getting so close. Now, while you're down there, leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next, and of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.